friends, and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz, and I am back with a fun card project for you today. I love this one. We're going to repurpose some supplies and mix them with some new supplies. We're going to create this rocket over the moon using the Emergency Card Essentials die set number 3 that I designed for Trinity stamps, and I'm going to show you the easiest possible way to use it. I am building the rocket first that comes in that set, but please keep in mind you can make all kinds of things slide. It doesn't have to be a rocket, okay? That just happens to be what comes in here, so I wanted to give you some inspiration. That front teal piece has some deboss details, so I just took a little black pen and sort of dotted inside of all of that debossing to give it some extra details. And then there is a base rocket that all of the other pieces fit on top of. I love that, so that this can sort of slide on the card and it sort of functions as a single piece, where sometimes if it's all just separate die cuts that you assemble straight onto a card front, it's a little less versatile. So I'm adding my little sort of side feet, if you will, and they do overlap the rocket itself, right? The sort of body teal piece of the rocket, but because of that backer piece, you know exactly where they go. The only part that isn't on the backer is the fire, because there's lots of different ways to do that. And so I am just cutting a little strip of cardstock and I've turned one end of it sort of into a triangle. And I'm going to glue that onto the back of my rocket with the triangle facing down just a little bit, right? It goes just a little below the rocket, and then I can add those fire elements onto there. Now you could just glue those tucked slightly underneath the bottom of the rocket, but this is a little more secure, and I like that because there are small hands in my family and I want to make sure nothing is going to happen to this guy. So I've layered mine up. I'm doing some matte silver and a little bit of orangey yellow, yellowy orange, and then there's this little sort of porthole, if you will. I'm trying to figure out what I might put into that porthole, because you could use that die and just cut it into the rocket itself. I'm playing with that. If you have ideas, I want to know about it. There's one more foot that goes on the rocket and it's going to go right in the center here. I like him dipping down ever so slightly onto the fire at the bottom. And then I'm adding one more sort of base rocket behind it. I have, right, that little strip of cardstock back there, and this is moving. So this is just some added stability, and I really love that. So here's our rocket. He's all finished and ready to go, you guys. He's so stinky cute. Next, we're going to make a galaxy background, and I've sped this up quite a bit because there've been a bunch of galaxy backgrounds on the channel, but I like to start with colored cardstock. I like a little pink in my galaxy, so I have some fuchsia cardstock and Distress Oxide inks. I am using Villainous Potion, Uncharted Mariner, and then Chipped Sapphire. This is not a crazy complicated situation. I'm just adding blobs and I'm making sure that my blobs overlap. This is really just playing, right? I try not to overthink this. I don't want any plain cardstock showing through, but I only put a light layer over those final openings because I just don't want it to look too stark and clean. Then I'll go over the whole thing with little blobs of black. It's going to look blotchy and weird, and honestly, it's the stars that make it. I'm going to use a letterpress plate, but if you don't have that, you could use some metallic paint or some white paint, some gold paint, anything like that to splatter on a starry background. But my friends, we're just adding ink. We're just playing. I heat set my panel off camera, and now I have the Starfield letterpress plate. You can hot foil with it. You can better press with it. But it's not big enough for the whole panel. So I'm going to do 1/2, 2/3 of it first, and I will peel that off. You can see how gorgeous that is. And then for the second piece, I'm putting my foil at the top of my plate. And then I'm going to use a little bit of mint tape. It's like Post-it tape, just to mark the bottom of where the stars were before, so I can line that up. I don't really want to foil on top of foil, and then I would get this weird line that's doubled up. And so this makes sure that when that panel comes out, it's like one layer of stars across the whole thing. This could not have turned out any better. I love it so much, and it was really, really quick. Now that we have our rocket and our night sky, we need a moon. So this was actually Halloween release. It's a stencil and die that go together, and it's meant to coordinate with a circle-shaped card. It's called the Full Moon Stencil. And I'm just using the moon here because it is so big and beautiful. And I'm going all over it with some sort of medium gray ink on a light gray cardstock. There's one little piece on this moon that is very delicate. And so I added a little bit of tape underneath that to hold it in place. Then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to add a little bit more color. In the end, I will also add more color to the pale gray cardstock of my moon, but I just am trying to get a base coat. Then I'm coming in with some silver metallic ink and a very small blending brush because I don't want it everywhere. I just want it on the edges. I want there to be the littlest bit of shine when this moon tilts in the light. I'm being very careful once again, especially in that little spot that I've taped down because it's lifted just a little bit because of that tape. But in the end, here is our moon. And you can see the light gray cardstock looks a little too neat and tidy. So I'm going to come in with a much lighter gray ink than I was using before and just go around the edges and create a little bit of additional darkness. And then over the spot where I sort of smudged my stencil, but you can see the shine there. I'm using the A7 tree frame for the front of my card. There's also an A2 version of this, but I needed the A7 because of the size of this moon. And I'm just going to rotate and try to figure out where I like him best. You can ignore the panel on the left. I made that one first and I didn't go all the way down to the bottom, so it didn't end up working for this card. But I am just going to add some glue onto the panel where it overlaps my moon. And I have two little pieces of cardstock in the bottom left-hand corner to remind me of where it was so I can sort of lay it right back down there. And so now I have this moon rising in a silhouette of trees. I do have ways then to support too that little branch that's hanging off there that I was a little bit worried about. So in my head, I knew I wanted the moon to come up high enough to tuck right behind that piece. From here, we can work on our sliding rocket. So I have my rocket on my starry background and I'm just holding my front panel over it. I want to be able to really see that rocket when the card is closed. Then I'm grabbing the largest slider track from Emergency Card Essentials die set number 3. It's a 5x7 card. We have lots of room to play with. And I'm just going to tape this little die onto my card. I want to make sure I have room on the left and right where I'm not cutting through that card panel. So I've got plenty of room to close the card up. Then I'm grabbing the larger of these two long rectangles. They have some score lines in them. And I am going to accordion fold on either side, and they're going to be matching accordion folds. So I have mountain, valley, valley, mountain. Then I'll add glue into the inside section of that, and I'm going to sort of press down onto it. So I have two little flaps sticking up in the center. That's what you want. Then if you really want this to slide well, take a pencil, a pokey tool, a something, and I want you to try to curl those little flaps that are sticking out as if they were ribbon. And then I'm going to push them together and you can see I have that little gap of space and I am reinforcing by pushing those a little bit together. I broke down the fibers of the paper with my pokey tool and that curling. When I do this, it leaves just a little bit of a gap when I glue my rocket on there so that it slides better. I'm going to stick this through the back and I am threading the two single flaps up through my track. Right? And again, I'm sort of double checking and making sure I've got that little gap of space and it slides. Then I'll add glue only onto the flaps. I trimmed these down a little bit because my rocket isn't as wide as the flaps are. You can absolutely do that. It's not going to affect it. And then I'll press my rocket onto that. Now I'm not squishing it super hard onto there. I don't want to get rid of that space I created with my pokey tool. But again, I'm double checking the slide. It's moving pretty well. Then I'm going to bring in some washers. These are number 10 washers. You could use a penny, but I have these and they're smaller. And I have a little scrap of cardstock. I've added some double-sided adhesive tape on there and I'll add both of my washers. And I'm just going to completely adhere them into a little pocket. I don't want them to fall out and be rattling around inside my card. I know a lot of people worry about small items like this if there are small children around. So this is completely enclosed in cardstock. I'll trim away any of the excess cardstock. I really just want that sort of weighted pocket. And I'm going to glue that onto the back of my little slider mechanism. I'll let that dry. And that what happens when I do that is that the rocket can kind of move by itself. Here I have a 1-inch strip of cardstock. It is 7 inches tall, so it's the same as my panel. It's a 5x7 card. And I have just scored at about 1/4 inch, and I'm making a hinge so I can glue my moon and my trees to my card and create essentially a card with 3 flaps. We have the front flap with the moon and the trees, we have our rocket panel, and then we have the inside of the card. So here's my skinnier flap, and I had to make sure this was narrow enough that it would be completely hidden behind my trees. The trees aren't super wide before we get that little gap of space. And so I'm being really careful. I like wet glue for this because it lets me wiggle it into place and get everything fitting just perfectly. I still have some delicate sections on those trees, and I want to kind of cover up the back of the moon. I want it to look like it's enclosed in there. So I have another panel that I cut with the same die. And I am trimming just a sliver off the side that will be at the inside. Because we put that little hinge in there, it needs to be a little bit narrower or it's not going to line up quite right. So I'm taking my time. I'm adding glue all over, especially in those thin little areas. This is going to reinforce it and make it a little bit stronger since it's hanging out there on its own. Alternatively, you could put a piece of acetate back there. I really like graphics shrink film for this. As long as you're not heating it with a heat tool, it's really sturdy and crystal clear. To add this to our star panel, I have to trim off another little sliver, right? I'm double checking it. I'm seeing where everything lines up. And I can tell I actually have just a little bit of that fuchsia cardstock hanging outside of my tree. So I'm going to bring in my trimmer, and it doesn't really matter which side. So I just went with the side where I have more room. Okay. And I will line it up carefully. And I have just taken that tiny little strip off. Then I will flip this over and line it up so that it's matching up with the corners of my frame and add some glue onto the back. I also was making sure that when this wraps around, it's not going to end up impeding the movement of my rocket and our little weighted pocket there. It's not going to get in the way. So a little bit of glue, I'll press everything until it's nice and sturdy and on there, and then we are good to go. Next, we can work on adding this to our card base. In theory, I could just add foam tape and then add it to the card base, but I was worried that panel needed to be a little sturdier. So I have a piece of 5x7 black cardstock, and I just traced a large oval around where my rocket and mechanism are moving on the back. And then I'm going to use my scissors and trim that out. I just used like a hole punch, a circle punch to get that started. And I'm double checking. I'm making sure that it's not going to run into that little mechanism. But this means I'm just adding a little bit of extra cardstock everywhere that I can. That front panel is a little sturdier. This is not a card that I'm mailing, my friends. I know I tell you that a lot, but when I make something really special, A, I want to see the person when I give it to them. Like, I wouldn't want to miss that. But B, I wouldn't want anything to happen to it in the mail, and it's a little bit chunky. So I'm not worried about adding an extra panel here. We're going to add some foam tape after that. The brilliant part is that sort of cardstock piece, the black piece we just added, is a nice guide for our foam tape. So I just added some thin foam tape. It doesn't have to be super thick, just, you know, the same width as, or height, I guess, as our little washer weighted slider piece. And then I will add glue all over that foam tape because once it's stuck down, I know this brand, it is like not moving. I would not get it up. So a little bit of glue all over the back of that. And then I have a box that I'm using that isn't super straight. So you can see that glue let me peel it up. I put it down, it wasn't right. I peeled it back up because I hadn't pressed too hard. It gives me a little bit of float time before I press everything flat. I should have just used my MISTI. But here are the sort of fun interactive elements, right? We have that front panel that opens. We have our rocket that moves mostly by himself. And then I wanted to finish the inside. So this is called Flight Deck, and it has some planets in it. It creates some beautiful debossed details. So I cut them out of some colored like mirror cardstock, and I am just adding a little isopropyl alcohol, mine is 90-something%, to a rag from my craft room, and I will rub right over the top, and it's going to remove some of the color from the foil. I learned this when I was trying to remove some glue from some foil cardstock. And I thought, well, I'll just grab my rubbing alcohol instead of water to get that off. And it took the color right off. It will do it on most foil cardstocks. I haven't found one that it doesn't work on yet. And this just helps to really bring out that deboss detail. Alternatively, you could use regular cardstock and then go over it with maybe a blending brush, or you could try, adding a little bit of like paint into those valleys where it sits. There's lots of ways to step this up. And then I'm going to grab a sentiment that was just already in my pocket. This is the birthday Simply Sentimental, or Simply Sentimental Birthday and Simply Sentimental Happy. I love these from Trinity. The big word has dies in lots of different fonts, and then there are sub-sentiments to go with everything. So I have birthday with white cardstock on a sort of dark blue backer piece, and it says sending you birthday wishes. I like the sending you to go with the rocket. Once that's on there, and I just glued them flat on there, I can add all of my planets. I love that this one has two pieces, so there's like a little ring you can put around that one. Are they particular planets, y'all? I'm not astronomical. Is that the word? Is that the word I want? I don't know. But these are absolutely super, super cute. One of them hangs a little bit off the edge, so I will just use my scissors and trim that off. I found I had to open the card all the way up to be able to get close enough to it. But my friends, that is our finished card. We have the shine on the moon. We have shine on our planets. Our rocket moves, sending you birthday wishes. And then there's a ton of room on the inside to write a little greeting. My friends, I hope this inspires you. I would love to know what you're going to move with the slider tracks from Emergency Card Essentials #3. Thank you all so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.